Do you practice what you preach? Or as other people put it, do you walk your talk? We need to not just say that we have sound doctrine, we need to live out our sound doctrine as well. Our behaviors need to line up with our beliefs. How are you doing in that department? Well, Jesus has some daunting words for us today on this topic for today's Pulse. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says this, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven." He then expands this point in the most severe terms in the next couple verses. He says, "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles?' Then I will tell them plainly, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you evil doers.'" These false disciples, they will claim to have done ministry activities, but the Lord will respond to them in the most devastating terms by saying, "I never knew you." I pondered on those words recently, and I thought about that third word, "I never knew you." How many of us are trying to do all these things for God, but God doesn't actually know who we are? Man, this was a game changer for the audience that Jesus was speaking to, and it was a shocker for some of them to hear those words come out of his mouth, because their whole lives they had thought that following the rules was how you pleased God. But Jesus says God doesn't want rules. He wants a relationship with you. He says that if we focus more on following the rules and obeying God out of duty rather than delight, we will never build an actual relationship with him. And he will one day say to us, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." It's so important that God knows you. It's so important that your heart lines up with your actions, because Jesus wraps up his Sermon on the Mount by saying this in Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it." You see, we as Christians, we're supposed to be doers of the word and not merely hearers of the word. That's how it's put in James chapter 1. These words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, they're supposed to be the foundation we build our lives on. And the foundation we build on, an important thing to note is that our foundation doesn't change the forecast of the weather that we're around. The rain and the wind came no matter what foundation the house was built on. But we need to be prepared for that by building on the right foundation. And if we're built on the rock, our foundation will hold us. And this rock is the words that Jesus just spoke in the whole Sermon on the Mount. If we are lining up with the Beatitudes of Matthew chapter 5, if we're refraining from anger, if we're moving the line of sin further and further back, and as soon as we take one step towards it, we consider it sin, so we move the line back and back and back, and we stay as far away from it as we can, and we start building this relationship with him instead of basing it all on rules, that is us building on the rock. And when Jesus finished speaking these words at the end of Matthew chapter 7, it said the people knew there was something different about him because he taught with authority. They could tell that his message was one to which they should listen to. And the same is true today. We must also listen to Jesus' message and do what he instructed. The reason why he was able to teach with such authority is because he was and is the Son of God. If we are Jesus' disciples, we must follow him. We must follow the Son of God, because if Jesus was just another man with a message that he invented on his own, we could choose to accept it, reject it, or follow some of it and ignore the rest of it without any lasting consequence. But since he is the Son of God, and since his message is of divine origin, we must accept his message and obey it today. The choice is still ours to make, but it's not an inconsequential one anymore. Our decision is a matter of eternal life and death, as John chapter 5 puts it. If we are to be Jesus' disciples, we must follow him in all things. Our entire life must be devoted to him. And if we will do this, the rewards will be well worth it. Thank you for joining me on this journey over the past month, going through the Sermon on the Mount. I highly encourage you to go read it, because the words of Jesus in this message are so powerful, and it's a foundation that we can truly build a life that pleases God on. I encourage you to go read it, Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, and start building your foundation on the rock. We hope to see you this Sunday at Radiant Church, 10 a.m. at 15 Crane Avenue in Greenville, South Carolina. Hope you're having a great week. God bless all.